Hey right guys, regulars on the channel or subscribers might remember me doing a video a couple of months ago about raising a safeguarding alert against a hospital staff member because she refused to make a duty to refer. Even though I explained to her on the phone all she needed to do to get this patient housed. Now this was a vulnerable patient, very significant health conditions, going back to sleeping rough. Ultimately we got the situation sorted out, as in we got the person housed, but they were left homeless this night because of this worker's refusal to follow the law. And in this conversation I had with her, she basically said that the hospital doesn't do duty to refers unless there are eligible care and support needs, which is definitely not the threshold set out within the Housing Act. This is not new legislation, it's been around for 7 years now, or 6.5 at the time this all happened. As well as getting the individual housed with the help of Will Flack, I also made an FOI to the hospital because I wanted to just see how big an issue this was. To be honest, I forgot all about it. I got a response back this morning, so it's like 2 months late. No apology for being late, by the way. And the results were that between January and October 2024, there were 208 patients identified as being potentially homeless, so as in there would have been a duty to refer for them. But there are only 3 duty to refers made in that period. And I get that some of those 208 individuals might not have given their consent for that referral, although realistically, why wouldn't you? You know, it could lead to help with housing, so why wouldn't you do that? And there will be maybe a few people who, you know, maybe just disappeared, or maybe there were some genuine issues why those referrals couldn't be made. But for the vast majority of those patients, they were left without potentially very useful statutory assistance that would have been owed to them had only that duty to refer actually been made. You might see me criticising the duty to refer elsewhere, because there are problems with it in itself, but that does not negate the fact that hospital staff should be making these referrals. It should be their bread and butter. They should be doing this not only because they have a legal duty to do it, but because by doing so they're actually going to put that patient in a position where their health is probably going to get better. You know, obviously, you know, or certainly it's not going to be made worse by being street homeless or whatever. So it's in the hospital's interest, it's in the taxpayer's interest to use this opportunity that you have potentially quite, you know, chaotic people or whatever, whatever sort of language you want to use for. They're in a safe place. You have that room to work with them, to engage with them, to build up trust with them, in order to actually get them some statutory help. So I've seen many people where a hospital stay was the thing which actually got them sorted out ultimately, because you had that safe place, you had that time just to actually talk with people and find out about what they wanted to do, and then use those statutory functions under the Housing Act to get them that assistance. And yet in this case it didn't happen. So what I'm going to do now is basically make a formal complaint to the Chief Exec of the Health Trust. I can't be bothered to wait around too much for this one, so I might just copy in some local press now and see if they bite, just to see if they're interested in the story. But the thing that really pisses me off about this is that when you see someone who is sleeping rough on a street, many people say, oh, you know, do they choose to sleep rough? Do they not choose to sleep rough? That is a silly question. The much more useful question would be to ask, how many organisations failed that person in order to leave them on the streets? And the answer often will be many. You know, many professionals who are paid, who are contracted to help people out who are homeless, and yet fail in these types of ways. And this is not an isolated situation. There are many organisations who simply fail to do very basic things, not just hospitals. We see charities doing it all over the place because they're not willing to challenge their local authority and kind of, you know, make a homeless application because it's so controversial. They're not willing to challenge those stupid non-priority decisions. But this is why we have this homelessness issue in the UK right now. It's not because people choose to be homeless, it's because professionals take a pay packet and they don't do their jobs, and it just winds me up so much. If you think about it, in the case we're talking about here, it required basically just one email to get them housed. That was it. That's all it took. And yet it seems that professionals are so whatever. I don't even know why someone would do that, why they would literally refuse to do a duty to refer. Because it wasn't just policy. You know, I'm sure it isn't a policy. I'm going to find that out in the complaint. But one of the things I'll be doing in that complaint is not only, you know, kind of making a bit of a fuss about it, I'll also be basically making them get training. I appreciate I deliver training, so I'm not going to be sort of selling them my wares or anything like that. I recommend that they get training from Shelter or someone, you know, really kind of, you know, with a good reputation or whatever. But ultimately they need to do it. As I say, if you're a hospital discharge worker and your job is to therefore arrange the discharge of people who are patients in the hospital, but you're not using housing law, I don't know what you're doing. Because I'd imagine you have a big issue of kind of people coming around, you know, kind of revolving door around hospitals because they get discharged street homeless, and yet guess what, you know, within a couple of weeks they're going to be back again because their health is in no way going to be able to recover whilst on the streets. So yeah, I'd just implore anyone out there who sees these kind of failures and is angry about them, do something about it. You know, just complain, just, you know, make a FOI request, do whatever you need to do to evidence the fact that there is an issue, because if you're seeing it, you're probably the person best placed to do something about it. just to make the point, I don't live anywhere near this area that we're talking about here. Bearing in mind I'm not actually naming the hospital yet, I just need to think through the implications of kind of naming the hospital. I need to work out whether there'd be any way of kind of piecing this information together to work out who it might be about. But anyway, in the meantime, as I say, I'm going to do something about it, and I just implore you out there, when you're seeing this stuff, when you're often kind of talking with your colleagues and seeing things which are clearly not right, there are things you can do. There are things you can do to improve. Now, at this stage when I'm making this video, nothing's improved yet. I made the safeguarding alert back in October. The next day they came back saying, oh, we've now done the duty to refer. I was like, well, that's too late really, because we've now sorted it out anyway. So they then made a duty to refer and therefore didn't investigate, which is another issue actually, but that's another issue for another time. But I'm hoping at the end of this process I will be able to essentially see that my complaint was based on some sort of real issue, and has resulted in, let's say, hospital staff doing some training about housing law, and then potentially if they're getting a few hundred homeless patients every year, you would think that many dozens of them, if not scores, or maybe even more than 100, who knows, would actually be getting that statutory assistance that's owed to them, which would be a good thing, right? So that's the plan. I will probably do a video again in a couple of months or weeks, however long it takes them to get back to me. I'm actually going to use ChatGPT to make the complaint, because I did that video a few weeks ago about using ChatGPT just to sort of show that it works. So in one sense, this piece of work is probably going to take in total less than an hour of my life. And yet I'm hoping that it will have that impact of actually affecting many people I never meet. Because if the discharge team in this hospital do take on board that sort of training, they will find that this stuff does actually work. If they actually use the law in the right way, which, as I explained recently, isn't just about making a duty to refer, you also need to make a homeless application, but I did that video a couple of weeks ago or whatever. But if they just do that, they're going to start seeing real kind of improvements, because most of those people, most of those patients will be in priority need through their vulnerabilities, if nothing else, and therefore their local authority will owe them some kind of housing duty. And so yeah, all sorts of good can come of it, but I just thought I'd just make a video just to kind of track this as we go through really, because as I say, it's not isolated, it happens all over the place, not just hospitals obviously, lots of organisations do this stuff wrong, and it is just so easy just to kind of get it right really, so let's see what happens.